it's harder for SDRs and harder for BDRs to go and call out anymore because nobody picks up the phone and everybody's getting bombarded on email. Everyone is getting bombarded on LinkedIn emails. So how do you go and reach this target audience of yours? I mean, you really have to be more thoughtful and I think descriptive of your value proposition. You really have to start on that value chain earlier than maybe what we did in the past, which was, hey, let's just get a meeting and then we can go and start doing discovery that way.
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the RevAmp podcast. I am joined with a very special guest today, James, and really looking forward to chatting with James about sales leadership in kind of this current moment. Before we get into the questions, James, why don't you give the folks at home a little bit of background about yourself, your role, your career, how you got to your current position?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. My name is James Eaton. Currently VP of Sales at Dozuki. Dozuki provides a SaaS platform for digital training for frontline workers in the manufacturing market. How I got here? Well, I've been here for a little bit over 2 years, but have been in technology, of course, my whole life. Individual contributor as mostly for enterprise in a variety of different SaaS companies, but really for the last 12 to 14 years, I've been focusing on doing Series A turnarounds for a variety of startups.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So, when you talk about a Series A turnaround, maybe you can give a little bit of like how you define that, what actually that means.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally I come into companies that have either pre-Series A or Series A funding. And they have the same goals that most of the SaaS ecosystem wants, right? We're at 3 million, we're at a single digit ARR, and we want to grow to 50. And so that's really turnaround might be always the kind of the wrong word, but it's maybe there's flat growth or limited growth, and they really want to accelerate that company into of course that 50 million threshold.
Yeah. So it's got to be interesting to jump into that kind of role in this moment where, we over the last, I don't know how many years, 4 or 5 years at this point, we started with COVID and that turned everything upside down. And there actually was a tailwind for a lot of SaaS companies on the back of that. And then as COVID ended and, the economic headwinds have developed and caused all sorts of other changes and almost like whiplash. I wonder, the playbook that you might have had previously, did you have to kind of rewrite it? Did you have to reassess based on things work?
Yeah, it's 100. That's a great question. And I think about it all the time, right? Especially in this kind of current age where we're in with high inflation and a little bit higher turnover and things like that. So yeah, I've tried to keep the core of my playbook the same, but I think that I'd say, prior to the COVID area, I'd probably run the same playbook with 80% static, 20% variability as I went from company to company. Now it's more like 50 to 60% static, 40% variability, because we really have to adopt and adapt, maybe is the better word, to not only the changing market trends, but just how people are buying these days. It's completely different than it was 5, 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think a trend that we've observed too, which and it's hard to quantify, but it does feel like the pace of change has increased, meaning not only is it changing, but it's changing faster than it was changing before.
100%. 100%. I mean, anywhere from hiring to just running a different playbook. I mean, 10 years ago, we were so heavy and prevalent on SDRs and BDRs and things like that to really drive inbound, outbound growth. And I even see that paradigm changing as we speak.
Maybe we can double click on that. What do you what's your view of that paradigm and how it should be?
Yeah, it's funny. I read something last week, and I want to give credibility and credence to this person. Chris Orlob from PC Club had mentioned that he was talking to a CRO who said we're no longer in this demand positive framework. We're really in this demand neutral or demand negative. And what does that mean for sales? It means that we have to do our job exponentially better than, not to say that we didn't have that opportunity to do it, 5 or 7 or 8 years ago, but it's definitely the paradigm has shifted. It's harder for SDRs and harder for BDRs to go and call out anymore because nobody picks up the phone and everybody's getting bombarded on email. Everyone's getting bombarded on LinkedIn emails. So how do you go and reach this target audience of yours? I mean, you really have to be more thoughtful and I think descriptive of your value proposition. You really have to start on that value chain earlier than maybe what we did in the past, which was, hey, let's just get a meeting and then we can go and start doing discovery that way. So I think my sales team has evolved to be more industry experts, but also focus more on pre-discovery. So we actually can get on the phone and talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing in this market and educating our prospects that way versus, I think it was just a traditional outbound method of, hey, let's just get them on the phone and we'll kind of build the value as we go. You have to build that value on day zero of that prospecting call.
For sure. I agree. The channels are very noisy. I think we all of our inboxes are inundated. 99% of the emails I get on LinkedIn are someone trying to sell me something I don't need. Like doing very poor enrichment or targeting. I don't need SEO services. I don't want to
it's
buy.
crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to buy a McDonald's franchise. But
yeah, gosh, that's by far my favorite. Like, James, you have so much time in your hands.
Right.
Not that we've ever asked you a question. We have so much time in your hands with, 4 kids, a dog, and working at a Series A startup or whatnot. You have so much time. You deserve a Blow franchise. I mean, did they take a look at my picture? I wouldn't. Blowing out hair is probably the last franchise I should be targeted with.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah, so it is both a challenge and an opportunity, I think, meaning
It is.
it is an opportunity for those of us that can think creatively to write a new playbook that positions us. It shakes up the board, right? The incumbents are, things are in flux, and that's the
Yeah.
opportunity to make moves. You mentioned that currently it's like 50-50 in terms of what's variable and what's static. What is the variable part of it, and how does it vary, and how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I can even talk about it. I'm not a big tech stack guy, right? I don't have 50 tools. I don't have that kind of budget. Especially in pre-Series A or startups in general, you have to run pretty lean from a tech stack. We have the traditional Salesforce outreach, things like that. But I always kind of brought the same toolbox with me. But to your point, now that we have to be much more creative in the way we approach prospects and the way we engage with them in every step of the opportunity lifecycle, we have had to be a lot more creative. We use a tool on the front end called User Gems that does champion tracking that has been massively effective for us. We use, especially in manufacturing, they're very interested in more ROI assessment, ROI calculators, but that's just not like, salesperson building that on an Excel spreadsheet. That's actually sitting down with the prospect and working through the metrics and the KPIs that are really important and core to that business. And so we use a tool called Minoa for that. They've been phenomenal. But here's the shameless plug that I alluded to. Going and presenting a proposal, infosec, legal, and of course our order form too has been really critical in how can we compress our sales cycle. And we use Deal Hub, of course, for that. Otherwise, maybe why would I be here? But I really, that's the way I've approached this 50% variability, is how can I get leaner, smarter, and how can I compress my sales cycle that much more so we can increase our pipeline velocity while also increasing the size of our deals. And I think us kind of graduating up into this next level of tech stack has really been effective for the team.
Yeah. And thanks for the plug. We appreciate it. Would have
Of
had you on
course,
regardless, but we're happy.
that's true. That's true. But either way, no, it really has been an effective solution, and downstream it's paying off in a huge way for both our private equity and for our leadership team, and the fact that we can get where our Salesforce accuracy is that much better, right? We can carry through some of the notes, which makes my job exponentially easier without me having to go and explain every single opportunity, right? So yeah, I think those are type of some of the things that I've had to pay more mind to. That might be the better way of saying it during this kind of, how can we get faster? How can we go and reach our target audience that much better?
Yeah. Um, you know, usually I ask folks about the trend that I've noticed, where there was a time where there was a proliferation of individual point solution tools and it was getting out of hand. And now with budget constraints, there's been consolidation.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're kind of not the tool, that you have.
Tool heavy at all. I maybe I would be if I had a bigger budget, but I don't think so. I every year, or it's maybe every day, every screaming moment I wake up at night is, how can I optimize and get better? And so when you're looking at our tech stack, I think 5 or 8 years ago, it's like, okay, we have all the budget. Let's just go keep throwing in these tools, because it's going to make our salespeople, our marketing team, our customer success teams that much more effective. And if anything, I think there's a heavier burden that's carried with that, where you're kind of forced to use all these tools, but are these the right tools for your solution? Not throwing shade on anybody's applications or anything like that, but I took a step back this year and said, or really 2 years ago, and said, how can we get better with less? Right? I think there's too much noise already. I don't need to get into go down that rabbit hole, but there is a lot of noise. And what I'm trying to get our sales team to do is prospect effectively and efficiently, right? I want every step of our engagement with internally and both externally to be as optimized as better. The more I can free up the team, the more I can have them focus on the things that work. And we measure that now. I don't think that was happened 5 or 8 years ago, at least from a sales leadership perspective. We didn't measure these tools effectively enough. And so now I look at it on a monthly basis. We have to, because it's like, how can do it? Am I missing a gap? Should I bring in something else? And I will, if there is that gap that's omnipresent. But yeah, we're constantly testing, trying to get better with all of our solutions, and making sure that frees up the salespeople to do what they need to do in order to close more deals.
Yeah. How do you think about that give and take between empowering them with the tools and processes they need, and not overwhelming them with not hierarchy, bureaucracy or rigid kind of processes that end up, may seem nice from the outside, but actually just add more, to the process?
100%. There's always that. I guess it's two different dichotomies of, like, one is, hey, let's give them every tool that they can. They can use, data aggregation tool. They can use, LinkedIn. There was just so many things, and I just think it just was polluted. Like, the whole process was just polluted. And so, one of my goals, especially coming into these Series A, is transitioning them from traditionally an SMB to mid-market, and then we get enterprise ready, right? That's the goal of taking a company from, $5 million to 50, is at some point you're going to have to build in some enterprise processes in order to, go up market that much more effectively. And so the one thing I noticed, and I was guilty of this as an IC too, is that prospecting as an enterprise AE is generally not always their strong suit. They'll do it, but if you what they're not going to do is they're not going to use 10 tools to do it. They're going to do it how they've always done it, or they're going to look at doing something a little bit more efficiently. And so, that's when we brought in this user gems application. It's like, hey, it's champion tracking. Like, you can't have a warmer outbound call than this. And we just had them incrementally start to do that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, these people are really warm and open to talking with me. So that's the big barrier right there, right? It's like, hey, you can increase your pipeline now. We do some compensation methods too to drive that behavior more effectively, but I really do think that it's I think that previous dichotomy of like, oh, let's bring in every tool possible and we'll try everything out and we'll see what works. That can't work with a startup. There's just too much noise. That's what we're really trying to block out. So yeah, I mean, I could go on all day about it, but that's just one part of the toolkit, are these applications. But we were sending out Word doc proposals or email proposals, which, everybody just, how can you pass an email proposal on to your leadership team and say, hey, this is something that's effective? And so, shameless plug number 2, that's where we kind of brought in Deal Hub to be like, what, how can we go and handle this procurement process more effectively and compressing it? Like, we shouldn't be doing these things in silos. We shouldn't do a proposal in silo and then have it go to an order form in silo and an infosec in silo. It just didn't make sense to me. And now that we can encompass that in one solution, it's been awesome.
Yeah. That's good. And
That's the last shameless plug I'll probably, if that helps you
no
out.
shame in it. And again, it's wonderful to hear, and we definitely appreciate it. And we love seeing the value provided by Deal Hub for our customers. Dovetailing on that a little bit, you mentioned the need to adapt to, be adaptable to changing environments.
Yeah.
How have you done that in, your current role? Like, what were, if you're able to, kind of situations that required, being adaptable, and how did you go about adapting?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a bigger question than I probably could answer on a 45-minute podcast, but because everything's changing, right? And it goes back to that kind of, let's just even call it, to Chris's point, that demand neutral environment. I think you have to sell, and you're kind of like a hybrid of marketing and sales and maybe a little bit of customer success, because you're walking them through more, of a enterprise-wide implementation. I think what we're discovering with, there's so many more people that are involved in the decision-making process, and galvanizing that across all these lines of business is so important. And that goes back to, sales methodologies of like customer success and medic and things that are really effective today. And I'm sure we've been saying it. I know I've been saying it for 8 to 10 years, or if not longer, but it definitely feels like, maybe before it was just, hey, they're a part of the buying decision. No, now they're a part. It's like a shared responsibility among the executive buyer. There's not just like one executive buyer anymore for an enterprise opportunity. I think there's many more people that have influence on that than just one. So anytime a rep comes to me, it's like, oh, had a great meeting with the executive buyer today. I'm like, you mean buyers? Because that's what we're seeing, right? It's a 6-figure or 7-figure dollar solution is going to require much more oversight than ever before.
Yeah.
And yeah, just trying to galvanize across that is going to be much more important. And if you're trying to sell one way to a CFO versus a COO or a plant manager or a CHRO, you're not going to win. Your close percentage is just not going to, it's going to plummet, because everybody has different stakes, right? They have different responsibilities. And I think that's the other thing too, is adapt quickly, optimize, constantly get better.
Yeah, totally. And I have this sneaking suspicion that some of the companies, some of the bigger companies that quite, you know, publicly kind of fell in this period, the ones that really negatively impacted were the ones that weren't able to adapt, the ones who maybe their
Yeah.
system, their process, their viewpoints were just too rigid, or they couldn't. It seemed like, you know, they were the ones that collapsed because there was this notion that the zero interest rate, money falling from the sky, that was the norm, and that this is just some sort of blip and will revert. And that's not true. This is the norm. That was the, you know, that was the deviation from the norm. This is we've reverted to the norm here, and we have, I think there's a need to get used to it.
You know, they've been talking about it for years, and I agree with it. And I read probably every article about it, about how the buyer at these respectful companies or buyers are much more educated. It's not even so much that, it's procurement so much more educated on this now. We have companies that outsource their procurement to procurement specialists that just go like, they're being just as judicious about their tech stack as we are, but we expect them to be completely different because they're a multinational or anything like that. No, I think they have much more oversight about what solutions they're trying to bring in. I mean, how often have I spoken with a CTO at a Fortune 500 company, and they're talking about how they bought 7 different LMSs. So it's like, why didn't we just buy one that could handle everything? But I think because a lot of these companies have decentralized P&Ls and decentralized just kind of buying units and things like that, that they constantly have this proliferation of the same solution. They just don't know they have it. So I've seen that, which is scary to me because I'm always like, listen, if we can sell in here, it's their job to know what, how many different competing software applications there are, or what gaps we're trying to fill. But it's a little scary to know how much smarter they've been in the last couple of years about how to acquire software than there has been in the past.
I mean, I think that there's just been a lot more focus and consideration of budget in every way possible. I think the easiest was headcount, right? That came first.
Yeah.
Companies did that. And I think then it came to, okay,
Yeah.
let's take a look at these tech stacks. And they're like, whoa, every team has 30 different tools. Like this needs to change. So that's it. And I think we're seeing that across all companies, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's necessarily just Fortune 500. It's every company that is adopting these same practices. And the scary thing is that they're all talking about it now. I liked it when they were all siloed and nobody ever really mentioned how to procure software or anything like that. So it was like a net new experience for everybody. Yay, how exciting. Now they all talk to each other. So they know what the best practices are for this. They've gotten smarter and they want to make sure that, and good for them. But we have to adapt to that selling methodology now, which is like, hey, these guys know how to procure software. They're not going to put one over on them or anything like that. They know how many users they need. They know a land and expand model. They know all the things that we've been talking about for years. And so, it really, and this is so cliche, but it just really nails on how you should be selling value. That value chain has to really start on the first interaction you have with them and carry it all the way through. Otherwise, they're not going to procure.
Yeah, that's actually, maybe I can focus on that a little bit. Given the changing nature of the buyer and that, they're much more informed, they're much more considerate of every penny being spent. There's a lot more focus on it from different departments. What does that mean for empowering your sellers to be successful in this kind of new environment where it's very different than before, where you have a buyer that's much more informed and much more critical of any sort of decision?
I anecdotally, you and I were speaking, prior to this recording, just about, how much, well, maybe it was even during the recording too, about how much noise we're getting from LinkedIn and emails and everything like that. And I don't know about you, but well, this probably shows my grumpy old age, or, kind of old man, kids get off my lawn type of mentality. But it drives me nuts when I get emails that are just pitching the whole time. They've never asked me a question, right? They make assumptions about everything. It goes back to my franchise anecdote about, Blow. Like that's probably not the target market that I want to have a franchise in. And for everybody listening to this call, I don't want to own a franchise. So please, neither Mark or I want to own a franchise right now. So please don't take that. But that's the thing that's driving me nuts, and kind of I feel like it's ruining it for the rest of us, is that everyone's just pitching constantly. But who wants to open that email? I just quickly delete everything that pitches. Nobody asks a single question other than, hey, can I get in your calendar for 15 minutes this week? Or, hey, and that blows me away. Like, I feel like we've lost this art of asking the right questions to provoke some interest. Give me something, do 15 minutes of research per prospecting, and I guarantee you'll have much better results than anything else. But that's the thing I keep telling my team, is that we can't pitch. You have to ask questions, provide value to them on trends that you've seen in the market, or comparatively, let's talk about some of their competitors and how we've helped them succeed in critical areas. That type of edification might not seem like selling, but it's far more selling than, hey, this is what my solution does. Very boring.
Yeah.
So we've just gotten a lot better about discovery, but there's discovery when you're talking with a prospect, but there's pre-discovery.
For sure.
Like, look at their 10K, look at their annual reports, look at their M&A strategy, look at, how they've procured software before, look at what they're talking about, their annual report. And I did an interview a couple months ago where somebody's like, oh, those are just fluff. They're all the same thing. No, they're really not. They're actually giving you the keys to it. But if you don't hone in on those trends that they're trying to solve in the next year, you're missing a massive opening. You're missing a massive goal for that company. But it blew me away that somebody thought a annual report and 10K were fluff. Like, no, this is what they're telling their board and their investors on what they're going to do to make this company even more profitable in the next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that blew me away.
Yeah, it lays out their goals and what they're focused on. So it's
Sorry for my old man grumpy, going off on a tangent, but you asked.
yeah, the meme from The Simpsons, old man yells at cloud.
That's right. So it's but no, listen, I think there, for the majority, I really do see a lot of salespeople getting better in that, but I do worry about the minority who's like, well, I'm just going to pitch. I'm going to send out. I'm going to do what is it? The pray and spray method. I think that method has been antiquated for 10 years, but yet we continue to hammer on it, which I think goes back to the core of where I see some companies and sales teams fail, is that they're still way too antiquated on their KPIs.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been easier to spray and pay, right? Spray
Yep.
with the AI tools,
Yep.
you can send at scale, customized, personalized.
That's right.
People are
But it's not.
Like you said, they make assumptions. I have one where it's like, oh, hey, Mark, I see you're in charge of hiring. It's like, not. You made that assumption and just threw it out there.
Yep.
Not the case. So
yeah, that's my dream. That's my dream, Mark, is actually like have maybe well, I know I'm not going to start a podcast, but maybe we could someday subvert yours into more like best practices on the spray and pray, and just give them some advice that way. Because you're right. It's either, James, I saw that you're the CEO. I'm like, no, and nor do I want to be. So it's just those simple things, especially when you're pitching an AI tool and you're 100% wrong on all your assumptions, does not give me the warm and fuzzies of like, yeah, let's go procure this.
Yeah, you got to be extra careful, especially if your tool
That's
is
right.
on the thing that you're getting wrong. James, time really flies when we're having fun here, but as we kind of wind this down, is there somewhere the folks at home can maybe learn more about you and what you're doing, or your company, or some resource that you like that could be helpful to them?
I feel like this is a shout out or a call out on me. I need to post more on LinkedIn. I have a natural smart aleck. Think I'm funnier than I am. personality, which doesn't always bleed well into LinkedIn, at least through the written word. But Dozuki has, Dozuki.com. I think we have a Voices of Manufacturing podcast. If you're ever interested in like how we're solving some connected worker training issues for manufacturing, I think it's phenomenal. But listen, anybody can hit me up. I'm always open to conversation as long as it doesn't revolve a franchise. But yeah, I appreciate the shout out. But yeah, I probably should post more on LinkedIn. Thank you for nagging me about that.
It's
That
what
was
I do.
wonderful.
All of
That's
this
right.
was an intervention for you to post more on LinkedIn.
That's right.